Welcome to Friends with Deficits. I'm your host, Adam Sultan, and my next friend is Louise McDermott. Louise is a therapist, as well as a vocalist, mom, and partner of renowned Austin musician Joe McDermott. I was happy to have her over and talk a bit about what she sees and doesn't see as some of the challenges in her life. So without any further ado, here's Louise McDermott.
I'm in private practice and I work with individual adults and mostly around anxiety.
Is that a thing?
Yeah, it's this thing called anxiety that, is pretty pervasive right now. Yeah, and I work with a lot with friends and family members of addicts and alcoholics. It's kind of my background.
Like Al-Anon kind of stuff?
Absolutely, Al-Anon. Okay. Yeah, if you're a member of Al-Anon, you know what I mean. Yeah.
I've been there at one point.
Yeah, that informs a lot of what I do.
And how long have you and Joe been married?
We are probably approaching 30 years pretty soon. 93. Yeah, next year.
And kids?
Yeah, he had a son already, and then we had two more boys who are 27 and 24 now. Yeah. But it's like a sort of reinventing yourself after kids. I didn't work. Well, I kind of managed Joe's career while I stayed at home with the kids, and then decided to go back to school in my 40s because I had this psychology degree back from the 80s, that was just sitting in a drawer doing nothing. Like 2 years into the program, they were saying, by the way, you can't do anything with a liberal arts degree in psychology. Nothing.
With psychology, really?
Mm-mm. Not really. You have to get a master's to be a counselor, or if you want to go on and be a researcher or anything like that, or a psychologist, you have to have a PhD. Yeah. And so I was like, oh no, okay. I don't want to be in school that much longer. So I just kind of graduated and free floated around. Then went back, in my 40s. That was always such a burning question, was like, who do I want to be? What do I want to do with my life? And I loved having kids because it kind of quelled that question it's like, I have something very meaningful to do right now. So, right. But I always just pictured myself in a room talking to people in an office about very deep and meaningful things.
I see myself the same way without any kind of degree.
Yes, you're a good listener, and they feel the sense of trust in you. Why not get paid to do that?
I know, why not? That's the one thing I'm figuring out.
Yeah.
Cut to Patreon commercial.
Yes.
It's the smooth sound of patrons keeping this podcast alive. How can you help? By visiting patreon.com/friendswithdeficits. For as little as $1 a month, you can have access to the exclusive Patreon feed where all the real details of our host and guests are dished out. Plus, you can rest easy knowing that you are a generous, generous soul. Why turn a blind eye to that? Visit patreon.com, patreon.com/friendswithdeficits for more information. Now enjoy the rest of the podcast.
So part of my story is I have this autoimmune disorder, which only attacks my eyes. It goes after my eyes. And this has been a part of my life since I was 13 years old. It's resulted in being pretty vision impaired at this point, and it's a very slow progressing kind of thing for me. So, the burning question is, will I still have vision by the time I check out of this planet, So It's kind of always like the race, I guess, It's what it feels like. I grew up in Dallas, and that summer between middle school, high school, 79, 80, we moved to New Braunfels, Texas. We moved right at the end of the summer, so I get to spend that one last summer with my friends, and it was a culture shock going from a big city to this very small town at the time. But I'd worn glasses since the 5th grade, and so I was just in for a routine eye exam for glasses, and the doctor was really taking an interest in my left eye. He just kept looking at it, shining that light in it and looking at it, and I'm like, okay. He goes, hey, do you mind if I take a picture of your eye? I guess not, okay. So took a picture of my eye and I was like, what are you seeing there? And he said, well, you've got a lot of scar tissue inside that eye. I was like, okay. And he said, do you recall a time that you ever had like the eye was really red and inflamed and you couldn't see out of it? And it was like, well, yeah, like last summer I had this period where I was telling my parents I have a film over my eye. That's what I kept saying. And so they bought me some eye wash, and that didn't do anything. And then it just sort of cleared up on its own. And then it had happened again, I remember around November of that year, and it got really red and very painful. And they kept thinking I had like pink eye or something like that, but they wouldn't really send me to the doctor. So he was seeing it after the fact. So those are called flares. Those were flare-ups I was having. And it's significant about the move because the move was so stressful. And as we learn later, stress has a huge part to do with autoimmune disorders. So at the time they called it iritis, inflammation of the iris, the colored part of the eye. And he just he said, we don't know what causes it. There's really no cure for it, and you could go blind someday. So he gave me some drops and some things. He said, when it does that again, you need to start applying these steroid drops and things like that so we could just treat it. And that was that. And so 2 or 3 times a year, that flare-up would come around, and that was my experience throughout high school, most of college. And
Was it related to stress?
I didn't know that it was, but yes, it was.
Okay.
The stress of moving, leaving all my friends, culture shock of a small town. It took about a year to settle in and get friends and things like that, and then I kind of got used to it, accustomed to. So I settled in and then went to college and would always just kind of treat the eye with the drops. And the first kind of set of mistakes started happening because in college, you don't want to believe you're going to go blind. And when most of the time you can see, it was just kind of a every once in a while issue. And so poor college student, parents weren't really paying for my meds anymore, wouldn't really pay to send me to the doctor, just go to the quack shack on campus. And I remember I needed the eye drops, and I was at UT this particular semester, and I remember going in there to the pharmacy. Bottle drops was $28, and this was probably 1989. Nobody has $30 to spend on medication when they're a college student. It was like, okay, so I just went without, and that was a pretty bad mistake on my part. So what I didn't quite understand what was happening is my immune system was attacking the soft tissue of my eye. He did say, it's usually in one eye. It can move to the other eye, but at this point it hadn't. So yeah, it would get really inflamed, painful, blurry. You're not self-aware enough to know when you're really under stress. The next most significant thing to happen is when you use steroid drops, those cause cataracts in the eye. So around age 24, 25, I got a cataract in that eye, very early, and it wasn't really brought on by age, it's brought on by the steroid use. So I literally woke up one morning, I remember I was at school, I was reading the Daily Texan, and I just thought to just look through that eye, and it was like looking through a piece of Swiss cheese. Mostly couldn't see it, but a couple holes here and there that I was like, this is weird. And I'm not having a flare-up right now, so that was bad, and got it checked out. Sure enough, I had a cataract. So I had to get surgery to have that removed. So if you don't know what cataract surgery is, they basically remove the lens from your eye, place an artificial lens inside your eye. And
I didn't know they replaced the whole lens.
they do. They take out the whole thing because it's clouded over at this. So they just kind of come in the side, extract it, put another one in. And at the time, the lenses they would put in, they would have to make quite an incision, and it would be a solid little plastic disc. And they said, your eye is not going to accept that. It's going to reject that. So they opted not to put a lens in. And they said, so what you can do, so you wear glasses. So you're going to have one lens that's like a Coke bottle, basically.
So wait, if they're removing a lens...
Yeah, I'm going to have a lens put on the outside now.
But does that mean you have no lens in your eye?
Yes, is what it means. So you can't focus, you don't see. You don't see really without a lens in your eye.
Without a lens, I mean, aren't you totally blind at that point?
You're not totally blind. You can still see, you can see light and you can see color, but nothing is clear or sharp. There's no.
But an external lens will correct that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And then I was like, okay, I'm sorry. I'm young 20s. I'm on stage. No, I'm not wearing a Coke bottle over one eye, basically. So they got this brilliant idea to give me this contact lens that was super thick to wear in that eye. That never worked. It was supposed to be comfortable, but it just never really fit. It felt like having a rock in my eye at all times. And it was just like, that didn't work. And I remember the eyes wouldn't come together, they wouldn't come and focus together. One would always sort of be off. So I don't really see out of that eye anymore, basically. Then a couple years later, another doctor, I won't mention any of these doctors' names in case they're still in practice. There were some bad decisions, but another doctor came along who said, let's put a lens in that eye because now they're foldable and they're soft and you may not reject it. I was like, cool, let's do that. Another part of this story is this conflict I had between my family are very much the believers of you grow up, you get a job that has an insurance, you need insurance to pay for all your medical, that kind of thing. And then walk in this more alternative life of you do what you want, you do what you love, you do what you're passionate about. And sitting in a cubicle was not what I loved doing. So I would get these state jobs now and then because that was about all you could do at the time. And that's significant because I need those jobs for the insurance, but the stress and the demands of those jobs caused my flares to come up. So somewhere around this time is when I started learning, they re-diagnosed it as uveitis. And what you have inside, you have your own vascular system inside each eye. And there's this thing called the uveal tract, which is this super highway inside your eye where fluids all go through. And when I flare up, it sends little glue inside those delicate soft tissues, and it causes these adhesions. So there would be blockages in my eye that fluids couldn't get through all the time. And so I had to learn a lot about ophthalmology, basically, to understand what this was about. The jobs are creating and causing the stress. So how is this working out for me? Not very well. I'm happy to have the insurance. But so anyway, another surgery to put a lens inside my eye, that didn't work out. The lens ended up just folding. It's still there today. It's now this web. There's a spider web that's kind of encapsulated around it.
Could they not remove it?
Every time they cut into the eye, my eye goes on attack. So it creates a flare. And every time that happens, that does more damage. And so I had to come to accept that I'm just not going to see out of that eye. But then the bad news was it moved into the right eye then, somewhere in my mid-20s. And now this time I'm a little smarter and I kind of know to treat it better. I knew not to neglect it anymore. Nothing really major happened until about age 28. I was pregnant with my first son. I remember waking up and everything was red out of my seeing eye, my right eye. And my husband, I was just something's weird. It's why is everything red? And he got me an appointment that it was a Saturday or something, We found a doctor to see me and they had to do an emergency laser surgery on my eye right then and there. So one of those adhesions had closed up and fluid was starting to build and build. Interocular pressure was going on, and had that not happened that day, he said I was within hours of losing the eye. No insurance, all that kind of stuff. So that was a big thing, and that probably had a lot to do with being pregnant and the hormones and the vascular system kind of growing and stress of being pregnant and things like that. So I had my next son at 31, and I remember one day I was trying to phone in medication, and I grabbed the pill bottle and I could no longer read the prescription number. And that's kind of bold, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, I'm not even reading. Okay, this is bad. And sure enough, I developed a cataract in the right eye. Okay, here we go again. This time that really had made a lot of advances, and they're getting so good at this now. There's now like 1-stitch cataract surgery, no stitch. So this time it worked. But when the surgeon goes in there, they don't know what they're going to see. They don't know what they're dealing with. They don't really know what the shape of my eye is. And after all that inflammation and adhesions, they really have to tuck the lens inside this very thin membrane to hold the lens into place. And he has to try not to puncture it with the scalpel or anything. So it's very, very delicate. But that was a wonderful moment because I remember I was sitting there eating dinner. My toddler son came walking up, and I looked down, and I'm probably like 48 hours later, and I looked and I could see his face more clearly than I had. And I could see my 1-year-old son's face, like really see it. And the way I had to see things is like we would take video and then play it back on our Sony Trinitron that my sister had given to me, this big television. And I noticed when I would see things, I would like see the house more clearly. So a lot of neat technology starts, like screens are the best things for me. Like anything backlit. It's very lighting dependent. Living here like I can drive a car because high contrast sunshine is like the best thing for me. But as soon as I go under a tree in the shade or in a dark room, can't drive at night, things like that. So it's a very weird thing. And the last thing that happened, it was in 2014. I was working at a hospital, outpatient hospital, getting my intern hours. You're working with hardcore, schizophrenia. I mean, just major clinical disorders here. And it was a little stressful, but wow, very meaningful. But went for a routine visit. They took my eye pressure and it was like 40. And what's normal is like around 8 to 16 is about normal. Mine's 40. So here we go again with that pressure thing. The doctor said, we're probably going to have to operate on that eye. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I'll be sure to get some time off next week or something like that. He goes, no, tomorrow morning, we're going in. Oh, okay. Fortunately, I had insurance at that time. That was lovely. And so this is what they did. So the pressure went up inside the eye and it wasn't responding to drops. So they put what's called an Ahmed shunt on the eye. This looks like like a mouse to me is what it looks like, with a little cord. And this is a little tube that's inserted and it goes inside and it opens up vascular space and it gives things that have been blocked up a place to go. It goes up and through this tube and then this ends up and then it gets absorbed by the eyeball.
What's it made out of?
That's a good question. It's probably, some kind of polymer, plastic. It's actually attached to the eye, surgically attached to the eye. It's very, very, very thin. And then they put what's called sclera, which is the white part. They put a little flap of that over it to condition. And so you don't feel, it's way up on the top of my eye. So I don't feel it anymore. It gives it a smooth surface. So yeah, I have this little tube that's inserted and it just helps keep the flow going so the pressure doesn't build up anymore. It has a place to go.
You still have it?
I still have
and it.
it.
Just works constantly? Or?
It's supposed to, yeah. And the thing is like most people get these are in their 80s or so. We don't really know how long they last.
Wow.
So we watch it real closely. So when I go for an eye exam, they can see the front of the tube because they're looking to make sure it doesn't get blocked. So that has been saving my vision since. But every time I go through a surgery, I lose a little something in it. Just the little while that my eye was at 40 did a little bit of damage to the optic nerve. And what that looks like to me is I notice like when I look at telephone poles, they wave. I don't see straight lines anymore. They have this like.
Are they constantly waving? Are they in motion?
They
or
don't. No, they're not in motion.
Okay, just bent.
They don't. See, yeah, I see like it looks like little chinks are taken out of the sides or something like that. Yeah, I don't understand what that is, but they describe it like. Imagine your eye was a beach ball that was way overinflated, and then once we put this thing, my pressure went from 40 down to like 4 while on the operating table because I had to be awake through this whole thing. And so they were telling me about it. And they were like, if the beach ball comes back down, it's going to have some wrinkles in it. Yeah, similarly here. And the thing is, you don't meet many people who have this condition. And then at some point, I don't know who explained it to me, and they said, you've got an autoimmune disorder. And your particular blend is carried by a gene, the HLA-B57 gene. So I had genetic testing done, sure enough, I have the gene. You don't have to have the gene, but it's more likely you'll get this disease if you do carry the gene.
Does anybody else in your family have?
They've not been tested. I'm really worried about my children. You usually find this more in men than women, and it corresponds with a few other, like you rarely ever have one autoimmune disorder. You usually have several. They come in clusters. And so they said people who have this often have rheumatoid arthritis. I got checked out for that. I didn't seem to have that. There's another one called ankylosing spondylitis. It causes like fusion in the backbones. This is more in men. But I don't seem to have any of the others. I just have the one that attacks the eyes.
And so is uveitis itself an autoimmune disorder, or it's just this autoimmune disorder caused it?
Wow, that's a good question. It's kind of separate. An autoimmune disorder, which is the body attacking its own healthy tissue. For some reason, my body thinks I have invaders in my eye, thinks that there's viruses in there or something, and so it goes after that tissue. And so I think uveitis would just be inflammation of the uvea, which is the tract I talked about earlier. Mm-hmm. And so it seems like there could be other causes, but I've never heard of it being linked to anything other than an autoimmune disorder. I mean, now we have Instagram, Facebook, social media, and there's groups and I noticed the groups are not very active in the United States. They're more active in England and in South America.
Is that where it's more prevalent?
I don't know if it's more prevalent, but I think they're just further along in the research. I decided I'm going to go see the leading specialists in this. And I talked to my doctor at the time, and he said, oh, yeah, there's this guy up in Boston, Mass. I wrote a chapter in his book. He's the leading expert on this disease. And so I flew up with a friend, and we went and saw him. His treatment was to suppress the immune system. So he would put you on a mild form of chemotherapy with a drug called methotrexate, very mild form of, they use this with cancer patients. So I went on that. I had it done locally, and it was just in pill form. His idea is that you mildly suppress the immune system. So let's not treat the eye so much. Let's treat the immune system, because what I have is an overactive one. It's hypervigilant. And so let's bring it down a little for a long sustained period of time, and then hopefully it just kind of tampers down. One thing I was told, they said that like the disease itself, the flares I used to get constantly, they're going to settle down when you reach your 50s. And I have to say, they were right. I rarely ever have a flare-up anymore. I can tell when I'm getting sick because things will start getting cloudier than they already are. And that's telling me my immune system, like I had COVID in May, I could tell something was coming up.
From your eyesight?
Yeah, from my eye. It's like my little warning signal. So that's a neat little thing that's coming from it. It's like, yeah, I'm probably getting sick, or something's happening, and yeah, allergies, things like that. So it's my little red flag, But yeah, so I tried going on that. I did it for about 6 months. We took a trip to Colorado, and West Nile was all the rage back then. Guess who caught it?
No.
Yeah. I'm there with my family. We all got bitten by mosquitoes that first night, but because my immune system was suppressed, I caught West Nile, because most people can fight it off. That wasn't fun. And I did it. I got off the drug immediately, got back on. After 6 months, I just kind of like, if I'm at risk of catching a lot of things, I don't know if this is really for me. I don't really think I can hang in there for 2 years. I think the 6 months helped somewhat kind of quiet things down a bit. But so, yeah, so that's that journey. That's where it is today.
So you're not on medication now?
I use the drops very sparingly, just, because they kind of do some more harm than they do good. The steroid drops, yeah, for ophthalmological use, that's not a word, but Pred Forte is what it's called. And
the other one that was the...
methotrexate was, that was in the body. That was, not a localized medication.
Right. And that you stopped?
That I stopped, and I just stopped myself. I didn't like the idea of, like, is that really a good idea to be tampering with your immune system like that?
Right.
It felt a bit much. I was willing to, but also it was very expensive, the drug, and you have to get a lot of liver, I have to get your liver checked all the time, A lot of this is sort of my own mismanagement of the disease and not fully understanding, not taking it seriously a lot. A lot of it was not having the money to, see doctors on a regular basis. A lot of doctors didn't know what to do with me. I knew they didn't want me,
Why?
I'm a liability. They didn't know what they were doing. And what it really takes is you need a team. You need a good ophthalmologist. You need a rheumatologist, and to kind of work together. So that's how it's best treated now.
Is this because in the past they didn't have the advances?
Yeah, they didn't. They didn't know a lot. Like, I'd never heard of an autoimmune disorder when in my 20s. I didn't know anybody who had one. I'd heard of things like lupus and, some pretty scary diseases. And it's just like, like, I don't want that, So, a lot of my own denial of it. So.
What could you have done differently?
I don't know. Part of it is I just wanted to live my life the way I wanted to. Taking it more seriously, I think my biggest regrets are the years in college where I should have demanded to my parents that they keep paying for my, they were of the World War II, kid turns 18, you need to be out of the house, you need to be in school or have a job or get married, like those are your options. And I didn't want to get married, all those kind of things. So I just...
Did they have concern about your health, your eye? Did they know, or did they even really know it was that bad?
They didn't take it terribly seriously until I had that first surgery. And even then, I remember my dad didn't want to pay for it. He didn't want to pay for that first cataract surgery. And so when I went to apply for some like Medicaid or something, and instead of getting on that, I got a job for the state. And so that's how I got that one paid for. It's not that he didn't have the money. It's just like that generation, spend money on your kids.
Well, if you were like, I'm going to go blind, would they be like, you're not the first?
Probably, yeah, or just like, or really, isn't that a little overly dramatic, or something like that? Because he was there, my dad was there when that first doctor said, oh yeah, and you may go blind, but at that time that was only in one eye. Okay, well, maybe
you got
you'll
one
lose
good one.
I have an older sister who she doesn't have vision in one eye too, for very different reasons. But it's like, okay, is that a thing that runs in our family? I guess we have vision problems. I guess so. So this is what's weird. I know you've talked to people who have autoimmune disorders, and they come in so many flavors, and it's unseen. It's not you. You're looking at me. Would you have any reason to believe I have vision problems? No. I function. I get around. It's not something people can relate to really unless they're seeing you having mobility problems or something. The fatigue, there's a lot of fatigue that comes along with it. I don't have rheumatoid arthritis, but I have lots of joint pain. That seems to be just sort of the formula that comes along with it. So since I don't see on one side, I also have no depth perception, I tend to bump into people on my left side. I remember being in a place where there's two lines, you can go to this register or this register, and I looked over and I'm in line and I jumped into this line. Well, I didn't think there was anybody there, so I just walked over and cut right in front of somebody. I didn't see them. And she literally said, "What are you, blind?" Well, yeah, half.
As a matter of fact.
People say things, like just it's weird, it's just like I'm half disabled. I don't know. It shows up and affects me, but it's not something I go around wanting to tell people about.
So this whole journey, as far as your left eye is concerned, is it just been out of the picture ever since?
Yeah, since I was about 25, it's been out of the picture.
Are you completely blind, or do you have light?
So go get a piece of wax paper and hold that in front of your eye, and that's a pretty good description. So I can tell, if I can tell there's a light source over here.
Yeah.
I maybe could see, if everything was blue, I could maybe detect that. But so when I go to the doctor, what they do is they cover this eye and then they try to, they say how many fingers, and I can never tell. I might be able to see some motion in it. That's not completely blind, according to them, you know.
Not very functional, though.
No, no, not at all. And I've had moments, there would be, whenever I was surgery in this eye and I'm recovering, I can't see out of it, so I'd have a patch over this eye and I only had that eye. It's very disorienting to only see out of that. But mostly my brain just kind of cuts off that data it receives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about
my right eye?
Right eye. Is it stable at this point?
It seems to be pretty stable. It seems it's day by day. The pollens, the allergies, things that affect most people, it affects my vision. I think to me, the biggest loss is when I can't drive anymore. But if there weren't things like GPS, if you were on a country lane, it's like, turn at the silver mail, I can't do that, But I feel lucky to be alive in a time when there's just so much adaptive technology like GPS, working on screens. I don't read books anymore. I read on screens now because black print started to turn to gray print, started to turn into very light gray print with little holes, like little spots missing. That's what happened, slow progress. But then there were great things about it, whenever I had to give speeches in college, the glasses came off and I really couldn't see people very well. And so I could look like I'm looking at, I knew where they were sitting and I could look like I'm looking at them, but I'm not getting any feedback. So if somebody's making a funny face at me, I can't see it. And that really boosts my performing on stage.
Yeah.
Can't see the audience at all. And it was just a shame when it's children, because they're awfully cute, and they're doing really cute things. But like the rock shows, it's just a sea of black. Maybe some of those people right at the very front, I can kind of make them out because some of the stage light is shining on them. But so there were some benefits to it, I think.
You answered my question, which is
Oh,
well, it
yeah.
was always about what are the benefits?
Yeah, that was some of them because I just, I don't get that feedback. And so I can imagine whatever I want to imagine is going on out there. I think as an introvert, that's really important because I think introverts are just, they're hypersensitive to information they receive visually, through their hearing, things like that. And it overwhelms their nervous system. I don't know if I could have done some of those things had I not been able to see so well, or had I been able to see. Would I like to be able to see again? Yeah, sure, absolutely. But it's just like, I feel like everybody has something they deal with. This is mine.
Yeah.
So if that's what it is, I just have to take it as it comes. But I like to play if this was 100 years ago, it'd be very
Stick
different.
a couple leeches in your eyes, and we
yeah.
tried. We did the
Yeah.
best we could. I guess a little farther than that.
Yeah. It's like, would they have just kind of left me out there to, let the bears go?
Hang out in the sun. Just see what happens.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah. So it taught me. I learned about stress. So I figured out a lot of these things. It's just like what work-life balance was a big one. My husband is a huge teacher. This is a person who knew at age 3 he wanted to be a musician. He's so lucky, and he had all the talent. He has the gifts. He has the talent. Songs just fall out of the man, That wasn't the case for me, It was just, never really knew what I wanted to do. And I told you, I just only had that one picture of me in an office, and I think that's a therapist, I guess. And so, he taught me about, you got to do something you love. You really do. You're lucky. And that's what you're going to be passionate about. And it was very evident in him, but not being terribly skilled or gifted at any one thing, that's a long search.
Yeah.
You're a musician. You probably knew from a very early age.
Kind of, but I do a lot of other things too.
Okay.
Half the time I'm like, am I a musician? I forgot to be a musician this week. What am I? Yeah.
And I find musicians are actually gifted at multiple things oftentimes. He's also very handy, like he builds and creates and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Do you work with people who have eye conditions or who are autoimmune?
I do. I was going to specialize that, but I didn't want the work to be that limited. I kind of wanted a diverse thing,
Mm-hmm.
But I can relate in a lot of ways. I sort of understand some of especially the unseen issues that the public, your friends maybe don't really understand, that you just deal with on a day-to-day basis. Yeah. The treatments, what the doctors say, the misdiagnoses, things like that. And I think another significant event that happened is my oldest son kind of took the dark path around age 14 into drugs and dropping out and all that kind of stuff. He fired us as parents at that age, And that wound up getting both of us in Al-Anon. And we both knew our fathers were alcoholics, but we didn't really know what that meant in terms of trauma that we grew up with, being in the alcoholic home.
Yeah, it's so hard when you have no other point of reference. You're just like, this is what a parent is.
This is normal.
Yeah.
It's like, wasn't everybody's dad a jerk? Didn't they all yell at you? And, mine is not severe, in a lot of terms, but it's just this constant pervasive thing. I think that's why I got diagnosed so young, had more to do with the pressures in my house. My mom died when I was 2, and I'm from a large family, but I'm spaced so far apart from my siblings. There's a cluster of 4, and I came a lot later. And so in a lot of ways, I was sort of an only child post my mom's death. I did have a stepmother from a very early age, and I was very grateful for that. But it was very isolating, very lonely, and a lot of pressures. And I'm his fifth child. I think he was 43, 44. He was sort of done with the whole parenting thing. And so he just kind of checked out, basically. And, everybody's story is a little different in that, but, I think it just, over time, that's a lot of PTSD that builds up after just so many diminishing experiences that you go through. And there's a build there, and I think that affected my immune system and made me very hypervigilant. So mind, body working together, psychology coming into it, it was the perfect storm for something to happen. Did
your son's path also increase the stress in your life?
Absolutely. And it was very severe at the time around when I had to get that, I was working and the ocular pressure built up and I had to get that shunt put in my eye. I'm very happy to say he's come out of it and he's home with us and we are building a relationship now. There were months I didn't know where he was. It was horrible. It was really horrible. Especially, we're kind of known in the children's music world.
Right.
I don't think anybody's judging us as parents, but it just means it can happen to anybody, I think. It had nothing to do with who we were as parents. It was just, his neurobiology going on at the time, what he was exposed to.
Yeah.
We kind of understood why it was happening. We just didn't really know what to do about it. And, like I said, getting into Al-Anon taught us a lot about, it sure taught us what we were doing that was making it worse for him by being overprotective. We had a lot to learn. So he was a teacher in a lot of ways. Questioning like, how do I want to approach this? What's the significance? What does it mean for me? What do I have to adapt to? And it just come into full acceptance of. You have to come into acceptance when you're told something like that, Like, okay, this is a reality.
Yeah.
I don't want it, but there it is. Does that mean life as I know it? It's like you adapt.
It sounds like you've already answered that for yourself.
I did, and it was a long, slow process of that. It's like, okay, this is a real possibility. If you can't see, there's still a lot of other things you can do, and we'll have to build on those things. So, it just opens up other options you would never have considered before. That's what I would say about this. No matter what it is, you just learn to adapt. And I just love that we're getting better about being more accepting and inclusive of, other ways to other choices we can make in life.
Yeah.
Yeah. I already have really good hearing, and a lot of what I do is I have to listen. This is my job, is just being a good listener. I have an example. So they put me through this thing called mobility training, and they were trying to teach me how to use a cane. Now, the thing is that I still can't see, so I don't use one, but like, what if you went blind in that eye? So they took me out in a parking lot, gave me a cane, and taught me how to tap the ground and put a blindfold on me. She said, just follow my voice. So I'm listening to the woman, I'm tapping the ground, and she took me between two cars, and I could hear it. It was so cool. The way it tapped, I heard the echo coming off the cars. And I was like, I just went between two. So it's like, that probably happens.
You weren't tapping the cars. You were
No, I didn't hit. It was wide enough that I didn't actually hit the cars. I just, the tapping on the ground gave me information that I was between two metal objects or two large objects. And that was a super cool moment. I
So
like
that's how
threw
that
off
works.
that. It's like that. So it's echolocation, I guess. I don't know what they call it. So I don't know. I really don't know. I'm not that clued into that yet, but I probably am, but I don't know how to articulate that. But it was like, that was really comforting me. It was like, oh, that's going to be something that comes on board if I have to use it.
But so far, so good. So far, so stable.
It's so far so stable, and if this is it, this is great. If it gets worse, that's okay. All the people who have to be with me at night or something like that, they already know, here's a curb, ground's uneven here, this is coming up. They already know to warn me. They're all well trained, on how to help me out with things. There's sometimes though, if we're with other people, my husband gets kind of excited and he sort of forgets and he walks off with others, and I'm like, hello, I'm over here on the steps. You left me behind. It's like, it's really cute because he's just sort of excited to be a little bit more free,
Right.
So that's just in terms of, what does it mean? What do you do? What do you deal with? It's just find a way to make friends with it and listen to it and listen to yourself. And
Good advice. Well, thanks. I think.
well, thank you,
that's a
Adam.
good conversation.
This was fun.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we
I like to
appreciate
get to talk about this.
All right. Once again, I'd like to thank my guest, Louise McDermott, for talking with me. And you can find out more about her at our website, friendswithdeficitspodcast.com. And please subscribe. Look for us on YouTube, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts for free. And if you'd like to help support this podcast, which I hope you do, visit patreon.com/friendswithdeficits. That's patreon.com/friendswithdeficits. I'm sure you heard the commercial at the top of the show, but it's helping keep this show commercial free. However that works. Regardless, please support any way you can, even if it's just listening and telling your friends about Friends with Deficits. Once again, I'm Adam Sultan. Hope to see you soon.